In the heart of London's Diamond District, there is a hole in a solid concrete wall. It is barely wide enough for a grown man to squeeze through. Over a single holiday weekend, someone crawled through that hole and left with a fortune. The strangest part of all? The men who did it were old enough to be grandfathers. This is Hatton Garden. For more than a century, it has been the center of London's jewelry trade. Its story goes back hundreds of years, to a time when it was the private garden of a bishop. Slowly, it became something else, a narrow world of diamond dealers and goldsmiths. Behind these ordinary shopfronts sit some of the most valuable stones in Britain. Deals here are still sealed with a handshake and a word of trust. And beneath one building, number 88, was a vault that people believed could never be touched. The Hatton Garden Safe Deposit had guarded the secrets of the wealthy for decades. Diamonds, gold, cash, things people did not want anyone to see. All of it locked inside hundreds of steel boxes, 2 floors underground. To reach them, a thief would need to pass locked doors, an alarm, and half a meter of solid concrete. For years, that was enough. No one dared to try. It was Easter, in April of 2015. The quarter was closed for the long weekend. For 4 quiet days, no one would be watching. The man who understood that better than anyone was named Brian Reeder. Reeder was 76 years old. He had been a thief for most of his life, and he was not just any thief. Decades earlier, his name had touched one of the most famous crimes in British history. In 1983, robbers broke into a warehouse near Heathrow Airport. They expected to find cash. Instead, they found 3 tons of gold bullion. It became known as the Brink's-Mat robbery. £26 million gone. Much of that gold was never recovered, and Brian Reeder was one of the men caught up in handling it. He knew gold. He knew vaults. He knew how to wait. Now, in his 70s, he was planning one final job. He did not work alone. He gathered a small crew of old, experienced criminals. Terry Perkins, in his late 60s, who needed insulin injections just to get through the job. Danny Jones, the fittest of them, who was said to study books on forensics so he would leave nothing behind. And John Collins, in his 70s, who would keep watch from across the street. Perkins, too, had a history. Back in 1983, the same year as Brink's-Mat, he had taken part in another huge robbery, stealing millions from a security depot. These were not desperate men. They were craftsmen coming back for one last piece of work. Between them, they had well over 300 years of life, and most of it spent breaking the law. They planned the job for months. Some say the idea had been alive for years. They studied the building, they watched who came and who went. They learned its weaknesses. They knew about the vault. They knew about the concrete. And somehow, they knew about the alarm. They had even brought in a specialist, a quiet man who understood security systems and how to slip past them. On the evening of Thursday, the 2nd of April, the crew arrived. One of them traveled across the city to commit the crime using his free bus pass for pensioners. They slipped in through a side entrance while the building stood empty. Inside, they shut down the lift and climbed down the empty shaft into the basement. And there, in front of them, stood the vault wall, half a meter of solid reinforced concrete. To break through it, they had brought a heavy industrial drill, the kind used to bore through rock. Hour after hour, the bit ground into the concrete. The noise echoed through the empty building. Finally, it broke through to the other side. But the hole was blocked. Inside the vault, a heavy metal cabinet stood bolted against the wall. They pushed against it again and again. It would not move. Their equipment had failed them. A pump they needed had broken. For all their planning, they were beaten by a single steel cabinet. That night they failed, and they walked away into the dark with nothing. Most men at that age would never have gone back. The risk had doubled. The police could have been waiting. The alarm could sound again, but greed or pride or something deeper pulled them back. 2 nights later, some of them returned, this time with better equipment and a new way to move the cabinet. They reached through the narrow hole and forced it aside. Then, one by one, The smallest of them squeezed through the gap, into the vault itself. Inside, it was a world of steel. Rows upon rows of locked boxes, each holding a stranger's secret, and they began to empty it. 73 safe deposit boxes were drilled open and cleared one after another. Gold, diamonds, jewelry, and thick bundles of cash poured into their bags. They worked through the night, in the dust and the dark, surrounded by broken metal. There was so much, they could not carry it all. Some of it was simply left behind. By the time they left, they had taken an estimated 14 million pounds. Some believe the true value was far higher. To this day, it remains the largest burglary in English legal history. There is one more detail. During the break-in, the alarm was triggered. A signal went out. A security company received the warning. A guard was even sent to the building. He looked at the front door, saw nothing wrong, and left. No police unit ever attended the scene, so the men worked on, undisturbed, through the silence of the holiday night. When London woke after the long weekend, the vault was found torn open. The scene stunned investigators. This was not the work of the young or the reckless. The patience, the precision, all of it pointed to old and practiced hands. But the men had made mistakes. A white van had been caught on camera near the scene. Cameras across London had read its number plate, again and again. Slowly, the police traced it back to its owners, and what they found surprised them. A group of aging criminals, long retired, or so everyone had believed. Quietly, detectives began to watch them. They followed them through the streets of London. They photographed them meeting in ordinary pubs and cafes. And there, in plain sight, the old men leaned close together and spoke about gold. The police hid listening devices inside their cars. And there, the gang did the one thing that no thief should ever do. They talked. They relived the robbery. They argued over how to divide the money. They boasted. They spoke about the gold and where it might go. They laughed about their own age. Every single word was being recorded. The recordings revealed more than boasts. The gang were already trying to turn their haul into cash. Gold would have to be melted down. Diamonds would have to be sold quietly to men who asked no questions. Detectives watched them pass bags from car to car in quiet car parks, never knowing they were seen. The precision, the loot, the men themselves, every thread led back to the same handful of pensioners. But one figure always stayed in the shadows. The gang called him only by a nickname. Basil. He was the one who seemed to understand the alarm, the man who let the others inside. He wore a wig. He kept his face from the cameras. And when the others were caught, he simply vanished. In May of 2015, the police moved in. The men were arrested, put on trial, and sent to prison. In court, the world finally saw them. Frail, gray, leaning on walking sticks. It was hard to believe these were the men who had pulled off the crime of the century. One by one, they were sentenced. Years behind bars for men already near the end of their lives. Some of them would grow sick and die behind bars. Terry Perkins died in prison at the age of 69. Brian Reeder, the master, was too ill to hear parts of his own trial. For years, the man they called Basil remained a ghost, a name with no face. Then, in 2018, he was finally found. His real name was Michael Seed. He was arrested in a small flat and later jailed. And yet the story never truly closed, because most of what they stole was never found. Millions of pounds in gold and diamonds simply vanished into thin air, never recovered, never traced. The same way, decades before, the Brinksmat gold had vanished too. Somewhere, perhaps, it is still hidden, buried in a garden, sealed behind a wall, or melted into something no one would recognize. Still waiting, in the dark, for someone who may never come. A fortune, taken by a handful of old men, through a hole in a wall. Most of them are gone now, but the treasure they carried out into the night has never come home.